talked on the way here that effectively change is the only constant, but as a species, we suck at it.
Humans are hardwired and have been for millennia to avoid change, because change equals discomfort equals death. As a people, as much as we have gone through very painful change and there have been, hard-won battles on that journey, I think, generally speaking, we are better off for the change that we have gone through than we were in the past. And
you had a hot shower this morning, didn't you?
The reality is, and I talk about this with a lot of our customers, is whether or not you believe Gen AI is a good fit for your business today, what you have to accept that it's not going away. You have to accept that, there will always be a world before November, 2022, and after. ChatGPT changed everything.
Gone are the times where you had to have millions of pounds behind a development program to develop something unique. We can go into a company of 5 people and build them something that is groundbreaking and better than anything else in the industry. And that capability is just fascinating.
Hi, I'm Freya. Welcome to the Skynet Chronicles, Business in the AI Age, the podcast that dives deep into the world where artificial intelligence meets business. Join us as we explore the latest trends, challenges, and opportunities in this ever-evolving landscape. From innovative startups to established enterprises, we'll uncover the secrets behind the successful integration of AI technologies. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and get ready to unlock the mysteries of business in the AI age.
Good morning, Peter, and welcome to the Skynet Chronicles.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So let's start at the beginning of your journey into creativity.
The beginning of my journey into creativity. What a loaded question. We'll work backwards from that. My journey into creativity probably started as much in creativity as it did in logic. I'm either fortunate or unfortunate in that I feel equally left and right brained. So I'm as comfortable in Excel as I am in the creative industry. So I suppose that's kind of led me perfectly to a world where everything I do is about the work and doing great work, but also finding new ways to do the work. And that I think dovetails quite nicely into what we're talking about today. And that's been my career for the last almost 30 years now. My first company started in the late 90s because technology at that stage allowed us to create ads in a very different way to the way we used to do them. And that's kind of just been the boilerplate for how I've been doing things ever since.
So you've just been playing with technology and then telling other people how to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of our game too, isn't it? And what about your journey from, obviously your home is not originally the UK. You started your life in South Africa.
Yeah, started in South Africa. And again, it's interesting coming to the UK. And I've been working in the UK on and off for about 15 years now. And the interesting thing about South Africa and any kind of immature market is the kind of talent that has grown in those markets tend to be more rounded. You tend to have fewer specialists because the market can't support specialists. Yeah. UK is a much more sophisticated market, a more advanced market. So what tends to happen is you have deep specialists that only do one job. In countries like South Africa, very few people only do one job. And that's actually massively beneficial because I think, the world needs. We talk about T-shaped humans, and I think it's a bit twee these days to talk about T-shaped humans. It's getting. I'm hearing that the term T-shaped in too many meetings now. We maybe need slightly more square humans, but the idea that you can be specialist in one thing and one thing only is great, but it's becoming irrelevant. So I think when I think about that journey from South Africa and coming from a market where you have to be more of a chameleon, you have to be more of a generalist, I think actually sets you up quite well for how I think the world is changing. Yeah. I think we talk about the democratization effect of Gen AI, and that means that suddenly people who are not creative can become creative. We sort of get into, well, what is creativity? Yeah. And I think being able to be comfortable with slightly blurry lines and boundaries of what your role is or should be is the skill set that we actually need, in kind of what's happening next. So, I think my journey kind of has sort of led me to a place where actually this feels quite natural now, which is quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we talked on the way here that effectively change is the only constant, but as a species, we suck at it. Yeah. And so those people that are able to be adaptable and can change, they'll succeed.
That's, it's the misparaphrased and misattributed quote from Darwin. The most adept at change is the most successful species, and I think you're right. I mean, humans are hardwired and have been for millennia to avoid change, because change equals discomfort equals death. And when we lived in caves, that obviously made sense. But for the last couple of 100 years, quite frankly, actually change has been the generally, I want to say, the harbinger of the positive. We've as a people, as much as we have gone through very painful change, and there have been hard-won battles on that journey, I think, generally speaking, we are better off for the change that we have gone through than we were, in the past. And
you had a hot shower this morning, didn't you?
Did I? Yeah, I did, exactly. I had to, but I think part of that change, I did a talk back in February, I think it was, around the fact that, we do as humans dislike change. And one of the things that I said was, change comes with responsibility. So you have two choices: you're either part of the change, or you're not. And if you're not, history generally, we know what happens. Generally speaking, historically, when people don't embrace change, but we have a responsibility to make sure that change is positive, because we can use this change, or any change, to kind of drive sort of unbridled commercialism, or kind of move towards a world where we're creating less effective content, or more spam, or more. We can use it to create deepfakes. Lots of people are creating. Bad actors will act badly. So we've kind of got this responsibility through this change to also kind of ask ourselves, what can we do to make things better, to actually improve everything from the work we do to the outcomes of the technology, which I think is really interesting.
I think so too. I think just look at some of the content that's being put out now. I saw some clips over the course of the Euro competition of Gareth Southgate effing and blinding and cursing and saying that he was the G. And somebody had done a really, really poor job of deepfaking it. There was no lip sync, really. The audio was pretty close. But it was hilarious content.
Yeah.
And so you can see that these tools can be used to create amusing, interesting content as easily as they can be used to create content which could breach security protocols, or content which could persuade people to follow something that they wouldn't ordinarily follow. It's fascinating times.
It really is. And I think, there's a lot of discussions around to what degree this is just a hype cycle. Yeah, if you saw, Gartner updated the hype cycle a couple of weeks ago, and they basically just adjusted Gen AI about 1 inch to the right of where it was before. It's still not on the trough of disillusionment. It's still at the peak of the hype cycle. So there's undoubtedly a lot of hype around this. But I think the reality is, and I talk about this with a lot of our customers, is whether or not you believe Gen AI is a good fit for your business today, what you have to accept that it's not going away. You have to accept that, there will always be a world before November, 2022, and after, ChatGPT changed everything. When that went public, it moved what was a very niche and very immature technology into the public's eye, into the public zeitgeist, and has matured immeasurably just in that time, and will continue to do that, obviously. So I think you have to accept that we're in a world where this will be a factor. And that means a couple of things. Obviously, we need to look at it from our perspective and from our business perspective. But exactly to your example, you also have to start getting a lot more critical about the content you consume and how you judge that content. A lot of the world, because the biggest economies are in election years this year. So the amount of disinformation driven by AI is through the roof. Yeah. And that's video, that's chatbots, that's all sorts of things that, are essentially by bad actors designed to, spread misinformation and propaganda, and do it very, very convincingly and tirelessly, because the AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't need a nap.
No, data centers are pretty happy running 24/7, aren't they? And that's why they've held back Sora, because of the risk over the election campaigns. And you can see the level of realism in those videos. This is a model that understands physics. It understands object positioning, and yet it hasn't been trained to. It's just been fed a load of video. And it's fascinating the way that these models have evolved to be able to produce convincing content and have these levels of understanding that were not programmed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the fascinating things, right? You think about, is it the 10 billion parameter sort of threshold, right? Where below that, the models were fine, they were interesting. But as we sort of started crossing that with GPT 3.5, you're right, we sort of had started seeing things we weren't expecting and capabilities we weren't expecting. And you talk about Sora, and you talk about, how suddenly when you teach something on everything, how it does actually derive logic and meaning and understanding from that, and it is able to then recreate rational new content from it, despite not being, kind of taught how to. It's fascinating how that's happened. And you look at Sora, and from a technical perspective, the video quality is phenomenal. From a performance perspective, you see it in the facial expressions and in the performances. It's very wooden, it's very dead. It'll just be a matter of time before that's dealt with. You look at Runway's Gen 3. That's I think even better than what we saw with Sora. For a lot of content. We talk about today. Gen AI today is as bad as it will ever be. And
every single example is
exactly
as bad as it's going to get.
Literally, and
people
it's
can say this sucks.
Yeah,
try it again tomorrow.
Exactly, and tomorrow, and so it comes back to that quote about we overestimate in the short term and underestimate in the long term. It's because we go, it's not ready, it's not ready. And then one day, sort of, it's that idea of gradually and then suddenly. One day you look behind you and it'll just be like, hang on, Will Smith is eating spaghetti. And, suddenly, and I mean, I hope that might not be an obscure reference, but if it is, just Google Will Smith eating spaghetti AI. It's totally worth it. And it's a good way of testing the video generation capabilities of AI. I think that's why it's so important to prepare for a world in which our businesses and our families and everywhere Gen AI has a place at the table. Because there is no single kill switch. It's not going to go away. Yeah. It's hugely important, yeah.
And we're getting to the point where reasoning to significant levels is solved. So I don't know whether you've seen the new OpenAI internal roadmap where they've got these 5 stages where level 2 is PhD level reasoning and level 5 is an entire organization run entirely within an AI.
And it doesn't even seem like a stretch.
It doesn't seem like a stretch, and it doesn't seem like it's that far off. And when you look back at the rate of change over, even since GPT-3 to where we are now with 4.0, that's not even the best model that's out.
Yeah.
Just the rate of improvement over that period, it's unbelievable.
It's like nothing, it's twee, but it's like nothing we've seen, and 4.0 is really interesting for me because I find it very, I want to say complete in its reasoning compared to, even 4. I find that, it tends to be more robust in its reasoning. But when you compare that to Claude, and you're like, it's Claude is head and shoulders above that.
Sonnet is outperforming 4.0 without question.
And it's going to be it's the sort of constant arms race. And I suppose to some degree that's where, we talk a lot about to what degree you have to be agnostic about the technology. And actually, I think you have to be fairly agnostic about the base layer of your technology stack. So your LLMs, your foundational models, because they are just developing so quickly and none of us are going to develop them. None of us are going to develop an LLM. Maybe we'll develop.
We might do fine tuning on top of a small model, but that's going to be about the extent.
Maybe we even develop a small model. Maybe we do some fine tuning. But that base of the pyramid for me, those LLMs are incredibly powerful generalists. And you need to be a little bit agnostic with those because some of them are better suited to some tasks, and some of them will outperform others over time. And I suppose the real magic happens, actually, like you said, from fine-tuning kind of upwards, as we say, okay, well, here's an amazing general model. What can I do to make this bespoke and interesting and proprietary? So a lot of the work we do for our clients is understanding how can we take what is something very generally trained, generally useful, and make it really, really laser-focused on their world and their context and make it really effective in that space, because that's kind of the magic. And that's Absolutely. About obviously the work we do, and we work with you guys on and it's about the client's data and their context and their world and what's important to them, because that's ultimately hopefully something that then drives us to something that can only exist for them. And that's one of the powerful things here is it's become possible to create these very, very bespoke tools that can actually just be created for this customer to do this series of jobs. And it doesn't.
Gone are the times where you had to have millions of pounds behind a development program to develop something unique. We can go into a company of 5 people and build them something that is groundbreaking and better than anything else in the industry. And that capability is just fascinating. And I think the journey we've been on with you guys from the point of, where were we, nearly 2 years ago, AI is coming, here's some things you need to worry about, to seeing the level of iteration, the organisation structures that you've put in place, the processes that you have there now. It's just absolutely brilliant to watch from the outside, because I kind of feel like a little bit of a proud dad. It would have happened without me, but just watching it from the position I've got is great.
The question is, are the training wheels still on? I wonder, do the training wheels ever fully come off? But I think it's an interesting, we've always been, within kind of my unit, we started messing with AI, machine learning, really kind of as far back as 2016, 2017. We started generating back in 2018, 19, and honestly, it was rubbish. We couldn't do anything with it. We're like, this is cute and it's interesting, but we can't do anything with it. And fast forward 4 years, and obviously you can. But I think that explorer's mindset is hugely important to, and I suppose cultivating and nurturing that explorer's mindset is incredibly important to help a business prepare. Now, you can't wholesale transform, a 5,000 person business overnight.
No, absolutely.
But you do have to start somewhere, So one of the things we talk about is you can't learn to swim from the shore, right? You have to find the small, somewhat low risk bets you can do, because they help you. Every time you do it, you learn a bit more, and it slowly
you bring in a few more people.
That's exactly it. It's like a groundswell. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like it's like a groundswell, and that exactly slowly allows you to do that. And one of the interesting things about Gen AI is we often talk about the fact that as much as technology transformation, digital transformation tends to be top down, it tends to be mandated. From the C-suite, the instruction is, we have now adopted this ERP and this program.
Yep.
Go and adopt, cascade it down.
Implement it now.
Gen AI is the inverse of that to a large degree. It's a bottom-up revolution. Everybody has this tool and these tools in their pocket. That changes immediately the way that you navigate that change. It means that simply mandating and using command and control structures don't actually work anymore. You need to implement structures that allow you to let 1,000 flowers bloom, so that what you can do is you can have 5,000 people figure out 5,000 and more unique ways of using this, and then let the good ideas percolate up to the top, and then go, hang on, that's a really good idea. Let's scale that. Let's cultivate that idea, and let's scale it back down into the organization. And I think that's very much the journey we're on at the moment. And, we haven't got it figured out at all, but I think being aware of the fact that this is bottom up, the real value is almost bottom up, not top down. Our job is to create an environment and create space to use safely and to operate within the kind of governance frameworks that our clients demand from us, but to also make sure that every single one of our people is in a space where they can contribute and they can add to this. Because I think the real power of this is the fact that it is so empowering for every single person in the organization.
And I think Oliver have taken some great steps, especially around their recruitment program, where they're effectively saying you need to be able to demonstrate AI experience to join us in the first place. We are AI first.
Yeah.
And that, it sounds cliche. It sounds like, well, obviously they're going to do that. But actually having that mindset to, we need to see people have that ability to change, that ability to test and play for them to be beneficial to the organization will help in the midterm, no end.
And it's a really interesting example that you bring up there, because it was slightly controversial or divisive when it was first discussed. And the reason for that is that, you have to balance domain expertise with Gen AI expertise, because what we're finding is when we deploy Gen AI, the skills and the experience of the individuals using the tools is almost more important than the tool itself. So what we find is, when you give a experienced food stylist access to an image generation module, and ask them to generate imagery, the imagery they produce with zero training will be better than the imagery we give to a Gen AI expert
they
who
know
knows
how
nothing.
to describe it.
Correct. They know what good looks like. Yeah. So that understanding of what good looks like is incredibly important in being able to create really, really good work. So there's this tension between Gen AI expertise and domain expertise. But the Gen AI first hiring approach that we've now taken essentially is exactly what you described there. It's almost a filter gate that says, even if you're not necessarily an expert yet, it means that you've acknowledged and accepted that you have to be on that journey. Because that is the talent we do need. We do need people who understand and accept that Gen AI is a factor and is something that needs to be understood. What the toughest thing for any business is where you've got people who either deny or refuse to change. And this is a way of saying that when we recruit, we want to make sure that we've got people who can help teach us and our clients, how to advance it, because there are people out there doing incredible things, and a lot of them are doing it completely in their personal time and completely out of the context of their professional lives. And, that's part of what we're trying to find and part of what we have to cultivate.
But play. Everything comes from that playing, because these are new capabilities, they're new tools, but fundamentally they allow us to do that childlike exploration.
Exactly. That's going to lead to new roles. And it comes back to my earlier point about specialization versus kind of generalists is, today when we look at how Gen AI affects, how a piece of work gets done, we tend to say, we've got these 5 roles and each of these roles will be impacted in these ways by Gen AI. In 5 and 10 years' time, we may not need those 5 roles. It may only be 2 roles that have now, kind of amalgamated all 5 roles into 2. And part of what we need to do is figure out what that looks like, because it's not as simple as a 1-to-1 replacement. That's not what this means.
No, it's not. And I think regardless of how good the tools, the capabilities, the models get, even if we do hit this level 5 that OpenAI are talking about, where you have whole organizations that are AI, people by people, and having that human interaction, that ability to pick up the phone, to meet, have a conversation, to get to really understand what the customer wants, not what they said in an email, that's going to be a key skill.
Yeah.
And so it's working with technology, but also understanding how to work with people and make the most of relationships. That's where I think it's going to be a fascinating space.
So interesting. You're exactly right. When we first started talking to our customers, really, really actively about Gen AI, one of the things I'd walk in my presentation would start with a slide that said that Gen AI is not about technology. And everybody would kind of go, what do you mean? We're not talking about technology today. And I would say, literally, it was about people. And I still believe that, yes, it is about technology, obviously, but the technology is not a differentiator per se. The people and the process around the tech is the true differentiator. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it really, really, really is about the people that ultimately interact with our customers. It's people by people. Now, what's interesting is when how that's evolving. One of the interesting developments is agents, and suddenly you've got these, I call them semi-autonomous and semi-intelligent, just to be really realistic about their capabilities, because let's
they're still babies.
Yeah, we're not fully in Skynet just yet, So when they are intelligent and autonomous, we may have a different problem. But when you watch agents work, and when you've orchestrated, a good, process of agents interacting with each other, it's a bit like watching a magic show, because suddenly the AI is doing what a room full of people were doing. You can watch the logic,
the handoffs.
Yeah, it's mind, and exactly the handoffs are the bit where you go, this AI just told that AI to do something. That AI is doing it and feeding it back, and that one is busy making changes to it. I mean, they are behaving, a little bit like toddlers, I suppose. Like semi-intelligent, autonomous, beings. And but I think the evolution of agents as creative and operational support systems to people, so that you have an agent next to you, who is starting to support you in your day-to-day. Those kind of things start getting really, really interesting, because AI then becomes a superpower as opposed to a risk.
Yeah. You're effectively outsourcing to something that's better than anybody you know.
Correct.
And when they can deliver consistently on that particular topic, and that those topics will evolve over time.
Exactly.
But I mean, just looking at holiday booking, you might use a travel agent now. How long is it going to be before you hand that responsibility over entirely to an agent?
Absolutely.
And it just does it all for you. It maps out your perfect holiday. It can already see all of your photos of where you've been previously. Exactly. It knows the sort of things you like doing.
That's it. It's a really good example. I think it's a perfect example, because the technology to do that kind of largely exists. What's missing to some degree is the personal context and understanding how you like to do your holiday and how you like to. And as you give the agent and the AI a better understanding of your context, and your priorities, it gets better at servicing that need for you specifically. A scale of 1 to 1 as opposed to a scale of 1,000 to 1, and it's really interesting. I think that's part of the reason that that embracing it is so important, because those are the solves that you almost can't see at scale, because there are 1,000 small things that is where the magic happens, I suppose. Yeah,
it's interesting because Google, from many angles, don't look like they're leading in the current space. Obviously, DeepMind absolutely killing it, but Google as an organization have felt like they're not as being as innovative as Microsoft, OpenAI, even Mistral and the likes. But then when you look at what they've got in terms of their understanding of us as people, using Google Photos, you've got your entire history. Yeah. It's already identified all of the different members of your family, how they've grown from being a baby to being an adult, and has them all in a folder for you. Yeah. It knows all of the locations you've been. It's on every device. So when you're stuck in traffic, it knows your journeys. It knows where you're going. It tells you how long it's going to take when you get in the car without you telling it where you're going. You combine that knowledge and information with all the things that you're storing, all the things you're searching for, feed that into something like a travel agent, and you've got a killer app.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Google Flights is already the most efficient way of finding flights, and we interact with that. Yeah. But all you've got to do is put an agent layer that communicates with
Imagine
Google
you
Flights.
don't even have to bother interacting with it. Yeah. It knows that you prefer this airport and those kind of flight times.
Well, you've been looking at Hawaii. Let me plan out all of the flights or work it all out. Yeah. Here's some suggested itineraries. It looks like you might be going to that conference on these dates. Have you looked at this hotel?
Click the buy button and off you go. It's all done for you with your preferences. And that's exactly right. And I think it sort of leads us into conversations about ethics and privacy. But I think it is a killer app, and I think I wonder if, when we look at Gen AI and we look at the hype cycle, and it's just kind of gone off the peak, right? I suspect that in the coming year, 2 years, the immediate future, it may have a bit of a PR battle on its hands, where things like personal data, things like disclosure, things like, public sentiment about Gen AI will start kind of coalescing into positives, negatives, and neutrals.
And you'll just watch Apple do the push into, right, we've just been waiting. Here's our privacy solution. Correct. You can have everything on your device. I mean, I got one of the little rabbit AIs.
Yeah.
It's basically junk. It's desk art. But,
it reviews well, though.
But when that functionality is implemented correctly on an iPhone, and it's a walled garden and it's happening on device, then...
That's exactly right. And I think that's always, when I think about kind of privacy and I think about data, I think exactly that there's this tension for me between making something that is truly useful to me. I appreciate that you need my data to do something that's truly useful to me. And I have, for whatever reason, a subjective opinion that Apple is more trustworthy with my personal information than Google is. Now, that's not based on any kind of logic. No, it's just
it's institutional.
That's correct. It is institutional.
Everybody thinks so.
Yeah, exactly. You just assume that Apple can be trusted because you're processing on device and you're doing this and you're doing that. And the truth is you're probably not doing it any better than anybody else's. But being Apple, you wait long enough that you can walk into the room and say, all those missteps they did, well, we're not going to do that. Yeah. We're going to do it like this.
And we're not doing any ads. So we're obviously better than Google.
Exactly. But quietly in the background, and... But I think if you want that level of service and personalization, there will be to some degree what's the word? A sharing of data required. And I think people will give up their data if the service is, if for a killer app, I think, yeah.
We're already seeing that, a killer app where our youngsters have given up everything to TikTok. And all they do is go like this.
Yeah.
But the information it's able to collect about them,
mind-blowing.
Yeah. And if you've signed up, then it's not even what they see on that device. It's wherever, any device they think it's you, performing anywhere on the internet.
And it's so interesting, and again, it comes to, I suppose maybe it's a generational thing. Youngsters are signing onto TikTok, I want to say at, 13, 14, but the truth is at, 8, 9, 10. And
get away with it.
Yeah. And they don't even considering the implications from a privacy perspective. They're just going, I want access to this content, and there's no value placed on privacy at that stage. And it's interesting whether or not they will ever place value on that privacy, or they just live in a world where actually,
I think it's just given away. And I don't think there's also any thought about diet. So it's easy to watch the food that you eat, the drinks that you drink. Maybe you drink too much on a weekend. I certainly do. But you don't really think about the information you consume.
Yes.
And controlling that diet of information, the things that you trust, that flow of outside in, can completely change your view on the world. Yeah. And yet they're just having it poured directly into their brain from a fire hose.
Yeah. And it's completely algorithmic. There's
it's designed for instant gratification.
Correct. And there's a great saying: if it's free, it's because you're the product. And I love that analogy. Like, there is no consideration of how the content you consume not only shapes your view of the world, but also to some degree then informs the world what shapes you. Which is really interesting. And that then starts feeding what you're fed by the algorithm. And it starts self-perpetuating. And there's a really interesting kind of play out coming there. And I think, we talk a lot about the benefit of AI being, obviously we're expecting huge, and we're seeing huge efficiency gains. But, a lot of the work we talk about is efficiency is sort of table stakes. Everybody's going to become more efficient. So if you're becoming 20, 30, 40% more efficient in the work that you do, so are your competitors. So then the question is, what are you doing with that headroom it creates? What are you doing with that efficiency that allows you to do something nobody else can? And I think, we personalization is one of the key areas we look at, being able to attract and address markets that are maybe too small or too niche to viably go after right now. Gen AI should unlock those for you.
Absolutely.
In fact, we're seeing it unlock it for a lot of our customers, and being able to operate at scales of 1-to-1, or seemingly at scales of 1-to-1. And but the effectiveness of that communication, again, does rely on accurate view of your consumer and your customer, so that you can actually meet them, with content and with information that is relevant and useful, and solves a need for them. Otherwise, it just becomes more noise.
So it kind of brings us full circle back to ads.
Always.
It's easy to say don't like adverts, but actually that's business, isn't it? So how are Oliver helping companies position themselves in this time of ever increasing content and ever finer or closer and closer personalization?
Well, I think, we talk a lot about, we call it the sea of sameness. There are other terms for it. The idea that the LLMs, by their very design, tend towards convergence.
Yeah.
If you ask, an image model to create an image of a CEO, chances are it's going to give you a 50-year-old white male. That's because that's what it's been trained. They are not inherently diverse in their outlook.
Just consumed the data they were fed.
They were just and it's an interesting point about they consume the data they were fed. The data they were fed, is generally, I'm going to make a bit of a sweeping statement here, but English, Western data. It doesn't have a diverse view of the world, because that's not how the world's data currently. The world's data is not, represented equally. The minority voices simply don't, just don't stand a chance.
They don't make it. Do they?
Don't make a dent. So you have to force the system to be more diverse. We've developed tools that allow us to systemize pushing more diverse content. But coming back to the question, I think the thing to look at really, really carefully is understanding how do you take, your customer's point of view and message, and really find ways of making it super relevant to a much broader range of audience. And again, we come back to personalization every time. I think it really is looking at the sort of Venn diagram of, what is the data and what is the equity around a brand that is unique to that brand? How can we combine that with the technology to create something that is unique and is proprietary, and is sustainable and is adaptable as well, because that changes. It evolves on the day and on the week and on the month, and it evolves, by across markets as well. So at the moment, when we do global campaigns, we tend to create a single master that's then localized for other markets. And localization really means changing the product and changing potentially the supers, the titles, the language, localizing that. Gen AI means we could change the entire ad in theory, to make it real, to make it hyper local. And I think so. A lot of the work we're doing is on understanding how to create work that cuts through the noise and is unique and relevant to our customers. Because the easiest thing we could do is just say, hey, ChatGPT, make this ad 100 times for all these markets. And we're just adding to the noise.
Yeah.
And, I think more and more and more, as consumers get used to more targeted, more useful communication, the onus will be on advertisers to meet that and create more useful, more targeted communication.
Sort of combining that closer and closer persona. So instead of it being at a top level of a demographic, a gender, and an age,
that's it.
You're getting in hyper personalized. You're combining in the brand voice.
Correct.
You're combining in the news and events that are topical at a time. That sort of fast marketing side.
Yeah.
And adding into that technologies like bias breaker, so that you're presenting something that is different to the bias within the data set.
Exactly. And it comes back to that idea of, we've got this responsibility with this change, and we want to create a world that is better than the one, that we found, and bias breaker and, tools like bias breaker are a part of that. So yes, it is about creating relevance, but it's also, like you said, about creating or trying to advance an agenda that is more diverse, that is more inclusive, that is more representative of the world that we would like to be in. So all of those things are hugely important as we do this. So it's never just about how can we drive efficiency for our clients, because, like I said, the efficiency is table stakes.
Race to the bottom, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a race to the bottom. If all we do is drive efficiency, ultimately there's no differentiation. We're just standing still. That efficiency has to be counterbalanced with, what we call, efficiency. We talk about, Gen AI allows us to create work with impossible efficiency, but also to create the impossible every day. And it's that impossible everyday statement is really, really important, because that's the true differentiation is, more effective work, but also just affecting positive change and trying to do something that starts creating the kind of messaging and the kind of world that, we would like to see.
And when we think about sort of the customers within the market, they're hugely on a spectrum when it comes to adoption. You've got some who are absolutely gung-ho. We want to try, we want to get in on this. We want to do a campaign that does everything yesterday, right the way through to, I was going to say some of the traditional companies, but actually some of those want to change quickly. The sort of the companies that they've heard about it, they've expressed a mild interest, but then they're going to take it away. They'll have decision by consensus. Maybe 60 people will sign off something next year. Yeah. How do you balance that difference within the customers?
I love that, because some of the customers that have moved the fastest are, your more conservative traditional sectors, financial services.
Absolutely.
One of the customers that on day one was, let's go, high street banks, let's do this. Pharmaceutical clients, clients that operate in very restrictive areas have actually adopted or been interested in understanding the impact of Gen AI faster than some of our clients that operate in faster, more dynamic markets, which has been really, really interesting. It's not what we expected at all.
I wonder whether it's because they had been playing with machine learning. They had decades of predictive analytics and understanding within their organization. So it's almost become a part of the culture.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of the marketing side of the business that's catching up with the rest.
It's so interesting you say that. I was speaking at a conference last week, and somebody raised the question, and they're from a major insurer, and they said exactly that. Marketing are only just catching up to technology, machine learning, AI, etc. Their analysts have been using it for years and decades. And they were saying, well, how do they leverage all that work that's been done in the past into marketing? And you're exactly right. I think those companies, ironically, almost have more innovation from a technology and kind of data perspective than a lot of your more kind of apparel or fast moving consumer goods kind of companies. That it is almost more, I want to say, intrinsic in their DNA to look to innovation. So it's a really interesting, you're quite right, kind of point of tension. So the first thing is, I think it's a journey. Like no customer, starts that journey quite at the same place. Some you go very slowly, and we do lots and lots of, we call inspiration sessions and workshops and talks where we just meet lots of people from our customers' worlds and just understand, explain, our point of view, understand their point of view, and try and explore to find those little threads you can pull on.
Yeah.
To find, I'm quite a big fan of a sort of, experiment and kind of learn approach. So finding small bets that allow us to build a business case, to build knowledge, to kind of go
to get an in, and grow it. I mean, it's that same sort of groundswell.
Yeah.
You're finding the people and you're taking them on a journey.
That exactly. So very big fan of that, of exactly that sort of bottom up approach, rather than trying to just walk into the room and do an organization-wide transformation. Because I think this is so fast moving and so complex that it's almost impossible, I think, to just take an entire, kind of global organization and just transform it overnight. It just doesn't work. But yeah, some of our best clients have been in very regulated industries, and they've all had a very open mind around it. And what's happening now is, as our approaches are all maturing a bit, is that data and that knowledge, that we've got from, say, analysts and investment divisions, suddenly saying, actually, hang on, can we not use that data in marketing? Like, actually, yes, you can. So now we can say, you've got an amazing, investment division, you've got analysts, and you've got great models pulling out huge amounts of data from the market. What if we could make that data relevant to customers at a scale of 1? And suddenly you go, oh, hang on, that's really, really interesting. Because currently you need humans to do that, right? And you can only do that in private banking. You can only do that in family offices. You can't do that at a kind of consumer level. But with AI, we actually can. Yeah. You could put insights that are relevant to, this person in their pocket every morning. That's interesting. And it can be actionable insights. And AI allows us to scale to that level. So, I think that's where we're starting to find these green shoots of unlocking, I think, what the real promise of this could be. And that promise really does always focus on the end customer, the end consumer, because that's really where the value sits.
And so do you think Oliver may end up ultimately pivoting from being an organization that helps companies effectively get content in front of people to being an organization that helps companies connect with their people? And instead of it being ad focused, potentially it's solutions, and you almost, there are examples already where you're becoming a technology solution provider.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think we're seeing some of that pivot happening already. And I think, a big part of our business is helping our customers, meet their consumers with information, content, advertising that is relevant, useful, pertinent and appropriate. And I think you're right. I think that will inevitably pivot. In some of our customers, we are seeing that already, where the relationship is moving away from the slightly traditional broadcast relationship of advertising to a much more niche, kind of relationship with the end consumer. And I think part of that is there are tens of thousands, if not millions, of, in inverted commas, AI tools out there. Now, we all know they're just front ends built on top of ChatGPT and others, but to the market, they look like tens of thousands of individual tools. One of the big questions we always have with our customers is, how do we know which tools to adopt? How do we know which, You
don't need to.
Well, that's the point. So that's exactly it. What we do is we take that complexity away for you. We figured out which ones to adopt in which use cases, because the answer is never just this one. The answer is always, always sits on a scale. So a lot of what we do, I don't, necessarily. Becoming a technology company is, I want to say, is almost a bit de jure.
Solutions, I
solutions
think.
is maybe better.
Solutions, as opposed to you're not going to be big tech.
Yeah, and I think solutions is a good word, because it is focused on solving a customer's need and hopefully a consumer's ultimate need. And I think that is about helping them navigate what is a very complex space effectively and safely, and quickly, as quickly as is appropriate. And I think that's a lot of what we do, is take that complexity and say, look, we've got learnings across a range of clients, range of industries across the world. And what's amazing is we're able to aggregate those learnings to other customers and say, well, actually, we've seen this in financial services in North America. Is there a correlation to financial services in the UK, for argument's sake? And that becomes really useful to our customers, as being able to help them navigate and learn from other markets and other sectors for that matter. So I think there is an evolution in the agency landscape away from pure creating ads, if you will, to becoming more solutions driven and solutions oriented. And I think it's a valuable change. I think it's an important change.
People value the solutions. Yeah. A lot of people block ads.
Yeah. Well, a solution is, by definition, useful. Ads aren't always useful, and I think we can even see it today. If you're served an ad that is, we spoke about, the conference in Hawaii. If you've been searching, you've signed up for a conference in Hawaii, and you've been getting, served ads to fly you off to Hawaii, and suddenly you get, one to fly you to, a completely, perpendicular destination. You're just going to reject. You're like, why are you wasting my time? Yeah. And I think consumers are going to become a lot less tolerant of things that waste their time, or things that are perceived to not be useful and not be relevant. So I think it's becoming urgent and more pertinent to make sure that what we create is in fact relevant and useful, as opposed to just noise.
And I think that is the perfect place to end this podcast. Thank you very much for your time, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. It was real fun. Thank you.
Awesome.
See you later.
Bye.